podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
No breaks. No breaks. No fear. No fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome along. In the depths of winter, there's not a great deal of Speedway action for us to watch, but there's plenty to talk about across British Speedway with various team announcements happening. I'm Ian Brannan. In this episode, I'm going to be joined by Eurosport's Dave Rowe to look at the Premiership and Championship team announcements so far and what we make of the various moves at the AGM, where a few tweaks have been made to how Speedway is going to look in 2023. We also catch up with one or two people who have been speaking at the various talk-ins that have been happening in the last week or so. We'll hear from Chris Van Straaten on bringing Rory Schlein back to British Speedway.
It took me completely by surprise. When I first got the message, I didn't realise that's what it was about, you know. Are you all right, boss? And I'm on my way back, and I didn't realise that he was on about competing again.
And Alex Brady on bringing Krzysztof Kasprzak back to the Adrian Flux Arena.
It's cost him a lot of money. He's not here to make the numbers up. He's not here to put up on the centre green after lap two if he's not at the front. He's here desperate to win.
And we have a good catch-up with Ben Duffill, one of the men behind BSN, the British Speedway Network, on their successful 2022 and their plans for 2023, which includes not only 35 championship meetings, but 19 Premiership meetings coming to BSN next year. It's all on the way on No Breaks, No Fear.
No breaks, no fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome along. Well, here we are. Christmas just around the corner. Santa's packing his sleigh. Some gifts have already been delivered to Speedway fans up and down the country. A few more set to arrive between now and the big day, and certainly before the start of next season. And I just thought the idea of doing this podcast was to update everyone on what's been going on, really, in the background of British Speedway. We had the AGM, of course. There's various team-building announcements being made. There are plans afoot for 2023, and really just to update you on all that we know at this moment in time. And joining me throughout this episode is Dave Rowe of Eurosport, but of course Speedway journalist, and he's been very much in the thick of everything that's been happening across British Speedway and the various announcements you might have read about in the Speedway Star. And Dave, it's looking like an exciting year. You know, we're heading into a different era now, because I know that 2022 was a relatively normal year. 2023 set to be even more like the old days, particularly with restrictions being relaxed for riders racing in different leagues, and also travel restrictions now much easier than they were a year ago. And really looking at a different time now for British Speedway, and some exciting team announcements, and it's looking like an exciting year, 2023.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. It's good to see what's happening so far, certainly in terms of riders coming back to the UK, and you mentioned a couple of the reasons why they've been away for the last 2 or 3 years, so very positive signs there, certainly with some of the Premiership teams that we're seeing declared so far. I think that was always the aim from what was rubber stamped at the AGM. I think most of the things that happened at the AGM, we were aware of what was likely to. Perhaps the big change or the big surprise on the day was the Championships different fixture schedule to what we've been expecting, but largely the AGM was as expected. And yeah, I agree with you. What we've seen for the next 2 or 3 weeks or so has been decent teams being built, a lot of excitement for next year. Obviously, everyone has to get through the winter, and it's tough for people. We understand that, but yes, there is real encouragement that come March, April next year, then I think we're going to have a decent show to look forward to.
Let's have a look at some of those things then that were rubber stamped at the AGM. As you say, these are sort of the end of a long season of negotiations in many respects. I remember the championship management all getting together on that night, the day before Cardiff, you know, in the middle of summer or whatever it was in August, and a hot day, and that's where some of the decisions were being made even then. But a change to the league points. Now, this came off the back of a bit of a public survey, didn't it? Ask the fans what they think. People have got their opinions on it, but the old school aggregate bonus point is back.
Now, I'm a big fan of that. I always was. We've not had the aggregate bonus point since the late 2000s, although it's carried on in Poland and Sweden. I understand the rationale behind what we've done in recent years in terms of giving points to away teams or giving you extra points for winning by a certain amount. I felt the league table to an outsider was far too complicated. It had about 17 different columns for all the different things you could do. I think this does simplify things, and I think generally it adds more interest to meetings too, particularly for a team that might go away in the first leg, if you like, of a league match and going to be losing by 14, 16 points. There's still an incentive there to make sure it doesn't get any worse, because they may feel they can come back and turn that round at home and get the extra point. So I think generally that keeps more meetings alive. We have a more straightforward system of 2 points for a win, no points for a defeat. We still have super heats. Now I know that divides opinion as well. What I will say is that the 3 super heats that happened in the Premiership last season for the 45-all draws, they all threw up really exciting races. It gives you an extra race with the top boys on the night going for it for an extra league point. You still get something. If you lose that super heat, you still get a league point. So you're only gaining one by winning it. You're not losing one by losing that super heat. So I'm in favour of the changes. I think they're about right. I think it will make our league table also far more straightforward to understand.
And super heats in the Championship as well, which is, of course, a new development. And I think in this last season, in 2022, we would have had, potentially 5 super heats in the Championship if they're in. So a good chance of seeing one through the course of the year, maybe.
I think so, and also, importantly, we're seeing this across all 3 leagues. What we are now unifying the format across the sport. And this is something that also was quite hard to explain in previous seasons. 3 leagues all running different formats, and even if you got to a situation of a tie at the end of a grand final, you'd have the Premiership that would solve it with a super heat, the Championship with golden heats, and the National League, I think it was going to be a 2-man runoff. So we've got all that thrown together now, unified. I'm sure, you're absolutely right. There's a good chance that you will see a 45-all draw at your track or involving your team at some stage in the season, in which case you get the extra race. Like I say, the ones I saw last year were entertaining. It's almost like a pairs race because, it is a pairs race effectively, because second and third is better than first and fourth. That's the extra point. To me, it adds to the meeting. I don't have a problem with it, and I think it was a good addition, and I'm pleased it's been, actually slightly extended, because of course it exists in the normal, the one-off meeting, but also if there's an aggregate draw as well. So there's almost like 2 opportunities to have one.
It's the extra drama, isn't it? People can say that they're not in favour of it or whatsoever, but I defy anybody to be at a meeting like that and you've got a horse in the race and it comes down to a super heat. It's got to be exciting, hasn't it? Because somebody's going to win and lose there and then. It's the old penalty shootout. It's what we want. It's how we want meetings to be resolved. Yeah,
this is it. Sport has moved on in the last 20 years or so, and we're not the only sport to use playoffs. We're not. Look back at British finals before the mid-1990s. They ran on the 20-heat format. Now, nowadays, you wouldn't dream of running a British final that doesn't have a final, a deciding shootout at the end. Everyone knows that someone can score a 15-point maximum. It doesn't automatically mean they win the meeting. But the thing is now, the riders these days, they've grown up in that format. In Grand Prix, in big meetings, there's a final. That's how it happens. And we're in the entertainment industry. We want the worthy winner as well, but we're in the entertainment industry, and quite often that means a big finish. That means towards the very end of your meeting, that's when things are decided. Now, you can't manufacture that throughout. If someone's winning 60-30, that's how it is. But if you've got a close meeting and they finish level, then why not find a way to sort it out?
Well, on the subject of close meetings and finishing level, one thing that will not be in doubt anymore are close finishes at the finish line, because transponders are coming into British Speedway right across the board. And this will mean, certainly for referees, that there's no doubt about who finished first or if anybody was moving at the start line. And we're also going to get much more data from these devices as well. Timing data, obviously race results. And so fans are going to have a greater level of information coming from the races and from the bikes. And we're also going to have a different life for referees up and down the country in judging winners and final positionings and all that kind of thing. There'll be no doubt anymore.
Yeah, and something that some people don't realise is the fact that many of the referees' boxes are not actually fully in line with the start-finish line. Some of them, like Wolverhampton and Birmingham, are offset by some distance down towards down away from the start line towards Bend 1. Others might be in line with the start line, but the referee where he sits for the control panel, he or she sits, isn't quite in line. So there is sometimes some mitigation if there's some controversy. But as you say, this will sort stuff out. Jamie Courtney, I spoke to him a few weeks ago to explain this, and he was very clear. Speedway here is not doing VAR. It's not trying to re-referee meetings, but what it is trying to do is offer this certainty that can sort out, as you say, the close finish, also the jump start. There should be we're going to have start finish line cameras as well. So a jump start or whatever, the referee will have information for that very, very quickly. And there's also several aspects of it. The timing, obviously, we'll know for certain race times, track records, etc., and all sorts of other data during races. Some of the things you've seen in Grand Prix and European Championships in recent years, speeds and so on. This sort of thing I think will come in as we go, but they'll start off with the basics. The transponders will be at all the tracks during 23. I think it's a big positive. Looking forward to it. Yeah.
Now, the data, as you mentioned there, not only shared with referees but with TV companies. Eurosport and BSN will have access to some of the data from the transponders. And do you know what? People love heat times. I tell you what, if BSN has had one request for anything, it's heat times. People always asking about them, and they have been difficult to get hold of. But heat times, well, if you love a heat time, you're going to love a transponder. So that kind of information is going to be available, and up-to-date information from tracks around the country as the meetings are going on. The information's going to be available pretty much instantly.
Yeah, and it might mean that that race times could go back in Speedway Star, which has been a bit of a bugbear for people over recent years. I know that. So yes, I don't. I realise that some people might think we're going to be having an overload of technology or an overload of information, but I don't see it being like that at all. I think, from what I understand, the system is very straightforward to operate. The clubs and certain key staff at the clubs will get a bit of training into what they do. The transponders are going to be at the tracks. They're all going to have, I think, 14 transponders delivered and literally handed out on a race night to the riders, so the riders don't have to buy the kit. It's really straightforward, and there's then an app which I believe is used, which the referee has access to the information, and the various people who need to display this information to the public and so on. I think it's a big step forward. It's something that's required because, as Jamie said himself, we're the only motorsport who haven't been using this technology. Watch a Formula 1 race, watch a MotoGP, and you see what they call a timing tower on the left-hand side of your screen with the positions and all the gaps. And all the gaps, they update within, every timing loop, every few seconds, the gaps are updating. Now, okay, our races are only a minute long, so maybe that's not quite so relevant, but it seems pretty fundamental in a sport that has close finishes and so on. We can get an accurate, definite view. We know the numbers. We're going to get the gaps. I think it's only a good thing.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the Premiership in general, because of course we've got, first of all, a new team, the Leicester Lions, who got to the grand final in the Championship and unfortunately lost out for their supporters away at Kings Lynn, which was their home track for the night because of how things panned out. But looking ahead to the new year, there's some work going on at the track there, but they're making the move up to the Premiership, and they've made a cracking start to building their team as well. Pretty impressive.
I think the move makes sense for Leicester. I think funny enough, it made sense for them to move down 3 or 4 years ago, but they've stabilised the club and they're now moving back up, and I think it's a good time to do so. And yeah, very, very good and ambitious team building, which has been complete this week with Justin Sedgman and Jake Allen completing the side, but higher up they went and got Max Frick, so they went and got an out-and-out number one. In fact, they had 3 riders who were number ones at their tracks this year. When you throw in Richard Lawson and Chris Harris, and you bring in Nick Morris too, who is an out-and-out track specialist and certainly worth more than a 6.5 point average around Leicester, because you would have seen Ian yourself in the Championship how strong he is around Leicester. So it's a good-looking Leicester side with Dan Thompson as rising star, and there's no doubt that he'll take scalps as well at that level.
And they're going to have some home advantage, aren't they, Leicester? It's a different track. It's certainly not the kind of track that many of the riders who have been blasting around the continent or the National Speedway Stadium, it's not that. But it's not Monmore either. It's got its own quirks to it. People like Nick Morris, as you say, have got experience around there, know it well. You can imagine, I think Chris Harris obviously is pretty good around there, along with Richard Lawson. Dan Thompson, of course, yes, he's a rising star at number 7, but again, a handy rider has grown up around that place, and they've got a lot of home track, not just advantage in general, but of course home track specialists in their team.
Yeah, Richard Lawson certainly flies around. He's done so on several occasions for his club, or even as a regular guest at Leicester. It's quite interesting. I've spoken to both Justin Sedgman and Jay Cowan in the last few days about joining. They're the most recent signings. Both of them have talked about how they want to get on track at Leicester pre-season and get some laps in, because it's so tough to go there 2 or 3 times a year as a visiting rider. When you start becoming a home rider and get to learn it really well, we see it in the National League all the time. The youngsters that are going there for the first time, it takes them some time just to get the hang of it. Very unique circuit. An improved racing circuit, no question, in the last 3 or 4 years. They've done some work on it. It's a better racetrack. Certainly people will see in the Premiership better racing than they did in the previous era at Paul Chapman & Sons Arena. And and also extensive investment after the trouble they had with the track towards the end of the season with the weather. Lots of new equipment coming in, drainage being repaired, lighting being improved. So I think we'll see a general freshening up at Leicester come next March time.
I think they're taking some of the centre green up as well, aren't they? Then sort of tarmacking that over, because that was a buster thing. He was saying with the problems that they had at the end of last season with that playoff final, there was nowhere to dry the shale out. It was, if there was somewhere to dig it up and lay it out, and that's exactly what they did at Kings Lynn before that grand final. Took the shale off because it was wet there that day, took it off, let it dry out on the infield, and then they put it back on again. And that's the sort of thing that they're maybe going to do, and give them a few more options to be able to work on the track when the conditions are tricky, because also getting equipment on and off the track was also damaging the track further, wasn't it, I think?
That your second point absolutely there about the equipment getting on and off was, yes, causing trouble, and also taking a great deal of time to move. It's the way that the layout there does make it tricky for machines to come on and off, especially during a meeting, and certainly tarmacking that centre and allowing more space for that to happen, and shale if required. It's going to make the whole thing a whole lot more efficient. So fair play. They realise what the issues are. They're going to do something about it, and fingers crossed the weather plays ball to an extent over the winter, so it can be done, hopefully fairly early in the winter, and then I'm sure they'll look to get bikes on track there sort of March time and get some practice sessions done and really get things moving.
Exciting times for Leicester fans, and their team is now complete then, and a few other teams complete in the Premiership as well. Of course, Bellevue announced their side a couple of weeks ago, and headline act there, of course, is Dan Bewley, and great to see the reigning British champion back in British Speedway at a track that we know well he loves very much.
Brilliant to see Dan Bewley back in British Speedway. I know he wanted to be this year, but the regulations didn't quite allow for that, and he'd committed to Sweden already. But brilliant to see Dan Bewley back in the UK, and then of course Mark Lemon had the job to do to work out who of his winning team he was going to retain for next season. It ended up with Max Frick, who was of course injured in the end anyway, going to Leicester. There's no Matty Zagar next year, but Brady Kurtz did a great job as captain, and he's back. Really interested to see Jamin Lidsey back in the UK as well. Possibly not gone quite to the top like we thought he would. Certainly a rider who needs more racing, I think, because he was a massive talent and still is a massive talent. So it's good to see him back, although I think he broke his scaphoid in Australia at the weekend. So speedy recovery to him for that. I think he'll be exciting. Norik Bladorn did well and only going one way better. Tom Brennan back in. And they went for Jake Mulford as rising star, which is, again, it's progression because he rode for them in the Colts this season. So you can see the team building ethos. Charles Wright as well, solid man in the middle order. No doubt in my mind, Bellevue will be there or thereabouts. Are they as strong as the team that took the title this year? I think that's open to question, but we know how good they're going to be around their home track, and I'm sure an exciting year lies ahead.
Well, Mark Lemon is not only the Bellevue team manager, he's also the CEO. He's been talking about his team selections for 2023 with Hayley Bromley.
Mark Lemon, you have just unveiled your 2023 Bellevue ATPI Aces and the reception has been immense. Talk us through your team. Are you happy with the guys you've picked?
Well, of course. Delighted to finally get the team out there. Obviously, it's a very sort of uneasy sort of time when you're building teams and you just want to get signatures on paper. But to get this 7 together, couldn't be happier. To bring Dan Bewley back to British Speedway, I think it's a real coup for Bellevue and the British Speedway. We're delighted to have him back, and it feels like it's a homecoming. So that's great. Another catch, obviously, Jamin Lindsay to come back to the UK. It's what British Speedway's crying out for. These top riders come back. He feels like one of our own again. And Norrick, Tom, Charles. We're delighted to have them back, so looking forward to it. And obviously young Jake Mulford, he's progressed from the Colts into the Rising Star program, and he's quite exciting and very eager to get going. So
absolutely, bring it on. I mean, we've got a title to defend next season. Some of the names from the reigning champions not rejoining us for the new campaign, and we wish those guys all the very, very best. But do you think you've got the septet to defend the crown next year?
Yeah, we've got Norrick Ladoon as well. So, it's obviously Ryder's not returning. It's obviously hard to leave anybody out, and obviously we have to build a team to a regulation points limit. So we knew that we were going to have to break the team up one way or another. Matt Frick's been a great servant to the club, and Matty Zagar, he's just come in and just was a revelation these last 12 months. And obviously it's disappointing not to be able to bring him back, but. Obviously, I can only fit 7 in the team. And Joe Etheridge also the same. He's done a sterling job for us, and we move on.
We do indeed. Well, Mark, we are so excited to see these guys in action. Cannot wait now until press day next year. All the best for your trip back to Australia over the winter. Have a well-deserved break. Let's bring on the 2023 campaign.
Couple of notes on injuries, good and bad news. First of all, the bad news, Jaimin Lidsey has broken his wrist in Australia just this last weekend, and so he has to have surgery on that. Best wishes to Jaimin. Surely he'll be good for the season, but it does somewhat throw a spanner in the works of his Australian Championship ambitions, which take place straight after the new year, very, very early January, and you can't see him really being fully fit for that at best. Charles Wright, though, has had surgery on his shoulder, and from what I've heard, he's sort of feeling like a new man and back to his best once again, and I think perhaps that shoulder issue has been holding him back a little bit, and he's confident he's going to be as good as new for 2023, which is an exciting prospect because we know what he can do.
And we know how good he was the year he won the British Championship, which was 2019. He rode well for Peterborough that year, and then he made the move to Bellevue. And probably with a bit more responsibility next year, because this year they had a very strong top 3 once Matty Zagar came in. Well, next year he will be that third man. I was amazed when I saw his average in the championship at Redcar and how low it was, at 7 point something, knowing how well he rides around that track and how exciting a rider he is. So yeah, if he's sorted out the issues, and we know shoulders and collarbones and whatever are always a bugbear for riders, and it's a sort of injury that you ride with, you try and manage, but you can't, if you haven't got the full movement you want, or it's jarring or whatever, it's an issue. So if he's got all that clear, then let's see if he can get back to what he was doing. I think he was at his peak about 3 years ago, just before COVID, and he's still young enough, definitely, to make that impression again.
So that's Bellevue. A couple of other teams completed their lineups this week as well, one of which you were on stage hosting, Dave. You were there firsthand. Kings Lynn announcing their full 1 to 7. Obviously, we already knew Frederick Jakobsen was returning, but the other remaining 6 were really, a mystery or a badly kept secret, depending on where you read online. But a much more solid-looking 1 to 7 on the face of it for Kings Lynn this year, and of course the key talking point, the rabbit out of the hat, if you like, be Krzysztof Kasprzak, the former world number 2, making a comeback.
Yes, and as expected, that was certainly the big talking point of Monday night at Kings Lynn. No surprise there. I find this a really interesting Kings Lynn team for a couple of reasons, and obviously Kasprzak is one of the big ones because let's be honest, we know he's a class rider on his day. We know he can score 15-point maximums. We also have seen the worst of KK as well, and Kings Lynn will desperately hope that they get the best of him for the majority of the season. Why do I find it an interesting team? Well, obviously on the one hand, people will say, where's your out-and-out number one? Are you going to struggle in heats 13 and 15? They have riders like Nikolai Klint, who again we know can be really good on his day. They've brought back Michael Palmtoft, who is strong at Kings Lynn. Thomas Jorgensen is part of the furniture there. Where's it going to be strong? Well, you've got Fredrik Jakobsen, who starts at reserve but won't be there for long. He gets a new average very, very quickly next season. They're effectively gaining a couple of points in team building on that. They've got Josh Pickering on an average of 6.1, I think it is, because the averages were calculated on the last 10 matches of the season, and he had a bit of a tough time towards the end. He'd had a crash at Ipswich. He wasn't at his best, but we know how good he is. Kings Lynn, of all the teams in the Premiership, are a side who have built quite clearly with riders who they feel have got far more improvement in their actual numbers. Now, if enough of them do make that improvement, and Kasprzak himself is on 6.8, if they do make that improvement, then they're going to be a tough nut to crack. The question will be, if it gets to a close Heat 13, Heat 15, have they got the firepower, or will they be so strong as a solid all-round team unit? Will that not matter? Will they have the points in the bag by then?
Well, you were on stage hosting this. You were with Alex Brady, the Kings Lynn team manager, and here he is chatting about the decision to bring Krzysztof Kasprzak back to British Speedway.
Krzysztof, again, is someone I've spoken to for around about 18 months. When I first took over, we spoke, and we weren't far off doing a deal for this season, but again, he committed to Sweden quite early, and obviously with Poland as well, so he couldn't do it for last year, or the season just gone. I'm aware there's obviously going to be mixed reactions with Krzysztof, because as you mentioned, he is a bit of an enigma. However, when he's on form, I truly believe he's one of the fastest riders in the world of speedway. You speak to any rider there is, and they'll tell you he's the fastest man in practice. No one's quicker than him in a practice, and he rides his pace really, really well. And he contacted me. He's keen to making a bit of a swan song in England. And he's told me he's here to win the league, and one reason only. It's a 5-figure investment for him to be here, starting with a 2. So it's costing him a lot of money. He's not here to make the numbers up. He's not here to put up on the centre green after lap 2 if he's not at the front. He's here desperate to win, and yeah, he rode well with Fred, and obviously they've got a really good working relationship. And he's been speaking to myself and Fred a lot while we've been away, and he's really excited by the challenge. He loves the track here, and he's desperate to try to win the league one more time here in England before he retires. So yeah, I suppose I saw somewhere online, might be someone in this room, say it's a bit of a Bjarne Pedersen kind of style, and I think they're possibly quite right with that. So yeah, he's a good team man. He's really been involved already with what we've been trying to build, and I'm really excited by having him here. And I think he's equally excited by the prospect of coming back to England. The remaining 6, even Jason as well. We don't have just Josh as a captain. We've got 6/7 captains within there. I don't really do a lot, to be honest. I was getting together and they talk amongst themselves. And Josh leads. Nikolai coming in was a massive thing as well. Effectively led the team with them as well, and Thomas last season too. So it's something that we work as a group, and by maintaining that continuity of having 5 of the same 7 from last season, I think that has stand to good stead. And the 2 characters we've added within that as well, Tofty and obviously Thomas, are best friends, and Tofty really should be part of the furniture at Kings Lynn anyway. And Krzysztof is a rider that gets on well with everybody in the team, and as I say, very good friends with Fred. So we should have a great team spirit, should have a team that wants to work for each other and do well for each other. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. And we've lost 2 riders from last season that were great for us, but I think what we've replaced them with, in my opinion, is a step forward.
Alex Brady there, the Kings Lynn team manager, says that it's a step forward, and you've got to look at that lineup, and if you're a Kings Lynn fan, surely you've got to feel confident of having a good shot at the playoffs at the very least, and after that, of course, it's a bit of a lottery, but it does seem a more solid lineup than this time last year.
I think so, yes, and obviously when Jakobsen does move up, their model is that they'll have a strong rider going at reserve, and that will be, depending on how the figures work out, either Thomas Jorgensen or even Josh Pickering for a time, depending on how the early season scores go, which probably quite a frightening prospect for others. So I think it's an interesting team build. I think there's no reason why it wouldn't work out, and it was good to see them also stick with Jason Edwards, because he came in mid-season. He had a great race with Jason Doyle at one point. He beat some good riders towards the end, and that's what the Rising Star's all about. So it's good to see them sticking with him.
That's the Kings Lynn Stars then. Another team who are now complete are the Wolverhampton Wolves, announcing their final signing, Steve Worrell making his way back to Monmore for 2023. But the big talking point is the arrival back at Monmore of former captain Rory Schlein. Now, we'll talk more about Rory in a moment. First of all, let's hear from Chris Van Straaten talking about that decision to bring Rory Schlein back into British Speedway, which came as much as a surprise to Chris Van Straaten and Peter Adams as it did to everyone else. Here he is with Ryan Guest.
We've always practiced and preached loyalty, and we've kept the bulk of the team from this season. And Rory coming back took us all by surprise. But, we just reflected on it a few hours, but we thought, no, we need to bring Rory back. He was a terrific servant in those years at Monmore Green. He's got his appetite back. He wants to come back to the UK. And, he wanted to come back. We were his first choice. So we've took him back into the team. At the same time, we'd released Nick Morris, who Leicester have expressed that, they needed the continuity and to keep Nick with them for this coming season. So we released Nick. Rory fits into his place, and then we just needed, some new blood at number 6. And we're very excited by all the reports we've heard about Zach Cook. And he was 23 years of age, and probably not an overnight sensation, but from what we've heard, he's an exciting young rider with a lot of progress still to be made. So hopefully that'll be with a Wolverhampton Wolf on his race shirt during the coming season.
Yeah, like you say, the big talking point was the return of Rory Schlein. Obviously retired at the end of 2021, moved back to Australia with his family. When he rang you and told you, what were his thinkings about moving back to the UK, and not only moving back to the UK but taking up Speedway again?
Well, it took me completely by surprise. When I first got the message, I didn't realise that's what it was about, Are you all right, boss? And I'm on my way back, and I didn't realise that he was on about competing again, in not only, in Premiership, but also in Championship. So full-time Speedway rider again, which I didn't expect. I don't think anybody expected. But he's fully intent on reaching the heights of his career that he's had before, and I'm sure giving him a few meetings to blow the cobwebs away, he probably will do, and he's already had a meeting back in Australia, to see how it feels, and apparently, tired a little bit towards the end as to be expected, but during the qualification heats was very competitive.
Yeah, people with close ties to Wolverhampton and Monmore Green will know about the 7-year cycle, 2002, 2009, 2016. So if you add that on, 2023, and it'd be nice to bring some success back to Monmore Green, because it has been a while now.
Of course it would, yeah. I mean, we've flattered to deceive in recent years, and we haven't really produced it when it matters. But hopefully this coming year, we hope to do that. But then every March we feel the same, and it hasn't worked out the last few years. And as you say, hopefully, I am a superstitious guy by nature. And so maybe you're right. Maybe it is every 7 years when I get it right.
Look at the bigger picture as well, because at one point you were unsure whether you'd still be here as promoter heading into 2023, and the addition of a 7th club and Leicester was pivotal to you staying on with Wolverhampton.
Of course, I believe the sport needs to progress, and to progress it needs a healthy Premiership, and we needed more numbers than 6. I understand, accept that, we couldn't take too many teams at the one time because there is a rider shortage, not only here in the UK, but throughout the most of Europe. So we needed to just take one team in, and hopefully that'll set a trend. And, in a few years' time, we'll be up to 8, 9, 10 teams, which is what we dream about.
Yeah, and just very finally, a look at the 2023 Premiership product. A lot of teams are nearing completion now, if they're not already. Great to see the likes of Dan Bewley back and looking like a competitive league once again.
Excellent. It's great to have him back, and we're glad that the PZM and the ruling authorities in Poland have relaxed those rules, which kept riders out of the UK over the last couple of years. We're glad the cooperation, and yet it looks a very healthy and entertaining league.
Chris, all the best for the winter.
Thank you very much.
Wolves promoter Chris Van Straaten with Ryan Guest there. So a very familiar looking lineup to Wolves. No major changes really. Zach Cook, the key addition really to the Monmore side, and Rory Schlein coming back and winding back the clock.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt that Rory Schlein will come back in good condition and with good equipment. He's only been away from racing for a year. It'll be a bit different to the fact that in 2020 everyone missed a season, whereas he's coming back this time when everyone has raced a full season, so it might take a little bit longer to get back up to full speed, but say fitness-wise and equipment-wise, no doubt there. And Wolverhampton, as you say, it's a familiar team, and that is always the way at Wolves. They are loyal to their riders, and they get that loyalty back from riders. They work with who they are confident with and who they trust. Sam Masters is an excellent number one and really pushed on and taking over as captain. People like Luke Becker, Ryan Douglas that have been there for a while as well. They're going to need, I think they're going to need one rider. It doesn't really matter who it is, to take a step forward, a decent step forward next year, because obviously there'll be fans who say, well, hang on a minute, you lost heavily in the playoffs against Sheffield, and now you're bringing back a very similar lineup to next year. I think Zach Cook's a really interesting pickup at reserve. He's got to learn the new tracks, of course, for him in the Premiership, but hey, we saw him fly around Kings Lynn in the Championship playoff final a few weeks ago. A good talent, definitely going to be worth watching. So I can understand people who might have hoped Wolverhampton might make more changes, but I can also understand from their perspective, they don't tend to change too much, and they're going to be strong at home, and that's going to be certainly help them towards getting the playoffs.
Yeah, on the subject of Zach Cook, Chris Van Straaten there was saying all reports are that he's pretty good. I mean, he has been very good for Poole Pirates over this last season. His brother Ben as well, another rider who has yet to be announced in a Premiership team, and watch this space on that one, folks. But, they learn very quickly, and I remember the Championship Grand Final at Kings Lynn. All the talk was, but the Cook brothers have never ridden at Kings Lynn before, and they haven't got the experience. And then Zach came out, took a bit of a beating in Heat 2, came out Heat 5, went from 4th to 2nd on the last lap. And it's like, yeah, I think we can probably put that argument to bed now. So very, very good riders indeed. And they're going to be an exciting addition. And Zach getting his chance with Wolves is a great opportunity. And another in the production line of great Australian talent that Neil Middleditch and Matt Ford and Danny Ford now have helped to introduce to British Speedway.
Yeah, they've both done really well. The rumour mill would suggest that Ben Cook may well also be seen in the top flight next year, but we'll wait and see on that. And certainly, I'd say that the time is definitely right for them to do so. They've done their apprenticeship in the Championship, and I think they'll both be very strong in that in the Championship themselves next season. No question about that. Good time for them. Zach, once he learns one more, hopefully he'll do it pretty quickly. He'll be at reserve. There's some good reserves down there. Definitely, but they're really interesting. Yeah, always good to see new faces in leagues who haven't appeared before, and you find out more about a rider as well when you see how they adapt to a different level, different circuits. So yeah, lots to look forward to there.
The Sheffield Tigers, the most recent side then to complete their lineup, and I think many people will be unsurprised to see Adam Ellis filling that final berth. But again, another strong lineup. They got to the grand final last year. This year, of course, they're aiming to go one better. A couple of changes in and among there. David Balago comes into the lineup, but they've retained the services of the likes of Jack Holder and Kyle Howarth, which we've long known about, and Lewis Kerr. Tobias Mujalak is back as well, but a different rising star. Dan Gilks gets his chance now. He was flying up until quite a bad injury, wasn't it, that he got last year riding for Plymouth, and up until that point he was really setting the Championship alight, and now he gets his chance having come back from those injuries at Premiership level too.
Yeah, I would think that if you look at the teams as they are, and I'm always loath to make predictions before you've seen all the teams at the start of the season. At the moment, I'd say Sheffield look the strongest to me. They've kept the bulk of their big guns from this season, as you say. They've added Belago, who I think will do very, very well indeed on the Sheffield track. I think it will suit him. Funnily enough, there's a good there's a real throwback to old Swindon teams when you look at him and Adam Ellis and Tobias Mujelak in the same side, so there's a lot of familiarity there and team spirit. That looks good. Dan Gilks, great to see him in the Premiership. I think he would have got his chance in the Premiership this year, but for the injury. He was named in the Peterborough squad this year, and I think that he would have had outings for them this season. So as far as I know, he's fully fit, back in training and been back on a bike as well. So he's one to look out for. He's certainly a real talent. You can't say with any confidence in mid-December that this team is going to be champions come next September, October time. So much can happen between now and then. But certainly if I was a Sheffield fan, I'd be looking forward to next year with a great deal of hope.
The Ipswich Witches are a work in progress. They've announced Eric Riss this week to join Jason Doyle, Danny King, Kinyan Rue and Jack Thomas in the lineup. Of course, a few of those were part of the Ipswich Witches in 2022, including, of course, Eric Riss, who's back for more. Still a few riders to announce there, but I think the interesting addition there is Kinyan Rue, who's a rider who's been talked about quite a bit, Australian rider. Of course, he knows Jason Doyle, and I think Jason Doyle's had quite a big hand in convincing him to join Ipswich, because there's a bit of interest from across the leagues, and he had a decent season in Poland as well, didn't he, last year?
He did, yes. It feels a bit like when Jamin Lidsey came over to Bellevue in the first place after previously being based in Poland. I think it's probably of a similar nature to that. Certainly if you've got the recommendation of Jason Doyle and you've spoken to Jason Doyle about coming, then that's a pretty good judge of rider, no doubt about that. So I think it's an interesting move. And again, it's good to see a new rider coming in. And one of the criticisms of recent years has been too much similarity between Premiership and Championship. Well, we're seeing that. I think that gap change next year in favour of some different riders in the Premiership. So it's a new face for Ipswich, which is good to see. As you say, there is a couple of gaps still in their side that we don't know yet whether they're going to try and get heat leader backing for Jason Doyle or go for more solid in the middle order. That's not been confirmed yet. I think everyone knew that Danny King would be back there. He's part of the furniture at Ipswich. Eric Riss was going well for them this year until he had his injury, and I think they'd missed him more than they thought they would. They made a couple of changes at the time because they'd also got the Ben Barker issue to deal with. They weren't quite the same after that, so I think they'll be pleased to have Eric Riss back. And they've also gone with Jack Thomas in the Rising Star berth, and he's certainly worth a place in the Premiership. So he's made the move from Kings Lynn. So I think with Ipswich, question mark simply because we don't know how they're going to finalise and what real structure they're looking at. Are they going to go top heavy, or are they going to go for all-round strength behind Jason Doyle?
It's going to be a fascinating one to watch that. The Ipswich Witches still got a few spots to fill and maybe some exciting announcements to come when you look at where some of their previous riders have turned up elsewhere. Maybe some new faces heading to Vauxhall for 2023 yet. Let's have a look at Peterborough. There's not a great deal to say, unfortunately, because they haven't actually formally announced any riders yet. The strong word is that Jordan Jenkins will be the rising star, but beyond that, no further news for Peterborough fans at this moment in time. But on that subject, I think all the rising stars elsewhere have all been named, haven't they, Dave? And explain to us about the rising star system, because a few riders have moved out of that now. Daniel Hume, Connor Mountain, Tom Brennan, no longer part of the rising star setup. What's the plan after rising star? How does life go for them, and how do they then now kick on to the rest of their careers out of the rising star setup, and how the other rising stars decided?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a couple of things to go through there. First of all, the criteria for, if you like, leaving the rising star system, and that's based either on achievement in the case of Tom Brennan, and I'm not sure the exact cut-off, but the average that you achieve, and he's clearly gone beyond that. Everyone can see the system has worked for Tom Brennan. He's now an established Premiership rider, so he is out of it on that basis, although of course very much still back in at Bellevue anyway. In the case of the other two riders you mentioned, Daniel Hume and Connor Mountain, that's based on age. I am told that the actual age range for a rising star is supposed to gradually go down as years go on. So I think those two are both around the mark of maybe 25, and maybe you could see in 2 or 3 years' time the rising star cutoff would be maybe 22, 21 or so on, and generally come down. So it's good to see new lads coming in, the people like Dan Gilks, other clubs sticking with their riders. I think you're probably not too far off the mark with Peterborough on that one with who they're likely to end up with. Now we're told that when when a rider leaves the Rising Star system, they get a 25% discount on their average. So normally a British rider gets a 2.5% discount, but a Rising Star leaving that scheme gets 25%. So that's what Tom Brennan, going back to Bellevue, will be on 25% of his average from this year. As things stand, as far as I'm aware, neither Conor Mountain nor Daniel Hume have a Premiership place, certainly not one confirmed. I found that disappointing, if I'm honest, because I think both of those were successful riders with their teams, with Sheffield with Conor and with Ipswich with Daniel. Both did their job, so I think if the system is working 100% perfectly, then riders who have done well with their clubs would find a place having come out of that scheme. So hopefully that will change in favour of them in the not too distant future. I'm very hopeful there will be a list published. I know there was some discussion at the AGM in terms of exactly what the makeup was going to be of riders, and there were maybe a couple who either were moved onto the list or moved off it or whatever. So that was definitely discussed at the AGM, and certainly my intention as someone who is involved in maintaining the BSP website is that as soon as that list is available, that will be there.
That's Dave Rowe, Speedway journalist that you'll know very well, I'm sure, and you'll read his works in the Speedway Star, and as Dave mentioned there, involved with the British Speedway website as well, and of course a reporter for Eurosport with us on this festive episode of No Brakes, No Fear as we look ahead to 2023 and what it might bring based on the information that we know at this moment in time. Now, coming up in a little while, we'll hear from Ben Duffill, the man behind BSN, the British Speedway Network, along with Martin Hunter, and they're looking ahead to an even bigger 2023 with coverage not only from the Championship but also the Premiership. We'll hear from Ben in more detail very soon, but it's the Championship where we head next, with myself and Dave having a look through the team lineups that we know so far in the Championship, and that's all on the way in just a couple of moments.
No Brakes, No Fear, the official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome back, I'm Ian Brannan, and in this episode, our little festive edition, we're looking ahead to 2023 based on the information that we know at this moment in time. And don't forget, over the course of winter, you can listen back to some of the old episodes of No Brakes, No Fear. I mean, some of the news might be out of date, but we've got some great interviews with some stars of British Speedway. We've had all sorts of people joining us. Danny King, we spoke with Tom Brennan, Sam Masters, Josh Pickering. All sorts of people have been on as guests through the course of the season. So go back and have a listen to those interviews and, I might learn something about your favourite stars. Right now, we're going to focus on the Championship, which is back once again for 2023 with a few tweaks into the format, a change to how the playoffs are going to work. We've got the new BSN series at the start of the season, and it was originally talked about that there would be 2 home and 2 away fixtures for all of the Championship sides to make the league season a lot busier, make it a bit more all action. But that idea was changed at the AGM, and I'm going to talk about that now because, Dave, is there a risk here then, just to play devil's advocate, if you're a side and you're out of the cup competitions and your league season doesn't go well, somebody's going to finish bottom of the table, of course, it just has to be how it is. Is there a risk really that your season could be over come, say the end of July, start of August? Isn't that a possibility, isn't it?
Well, in answer to that question, the answer is very firmly yes. If you do have an unsuccessful season, if you are struggling, then obviously the format that we have next year would leave you with 11 home matches. You'd have 8 in the league, because thankfully we do have the 9 teams with Edinburgh back in. So you'd have the 8, and say you were knocked out of the cup in the first round and didn't make any progress in the BSN series. That would be 2 meetings there, so that would be 11. So yeah, absolutely, it would be a short season. Now, whether if you're having a tough time, whether you want to do any more, then it becomes up to you. I know Birmingham, for example, this year, they finished league matches very, very early, and they ran a couple of challenge matches against Coventry and Cradley and actually got decent crowds for those meetings. So there are things to do, but definitely the rationale appears to be that if you're having success, if you're still involved in competitions, those key meetings are the ones that are going to continue. End of August is the cut-off. That's quite clear for all leagues, and crack on with the playoffs, or indeed in the Championship, the mini-league system in early September. And I think the biggest problem, and you'll have experienced it yourself with BSN, was the situation we've had in the last 2 years. If the Championship playoff quarterfinals got delayed, if one quarterfinal got delayed, it was then put back the following week, and it delayed everything. And that's why we ended up at where we did at the end of October or beyond. So the idea will be crack straight onto the playoffs, or the league stage of the playoffs in early September. It's 2 more meetings for each club, and then I imagine the grand final to be staged hopefully towards the end of September, when normally, fingers crossed, normally the weather isn't too bad, but you've got more scope to play with if it does go wrong. So I can see it both ways. What I would say is for the mini league at the start of the season, that is the only time to do that. I wasn't particularly a fan of I understand why the Summer Trophy was brought in when it was, but as far as a regionalised 3-team tournament, for me, the best time of the year for that is the start of the season, so it's good to see it back there.
Berwick Bandits are complete. I think they were the first team, weren't they, to sort of fully announce their lineup. And once again, Rory Schlein makes an appearance in that lineup as well that we've talked about. But they're also joined by Thomas Jorgensen, who makes a return to the Berwick Bandits. Jonas Knudsen and Leon Flint and Jai Etheridge are back from this last year. Connor Coles in the lineup as well, along with Nathan Stoneman, who was part of the setup last year as well. So a mixture of familiarity and some old faces there, and Rory Schlein. I think Rory Schlein will do well at Berwick. I think he'll go well around that track. I spoke to Thomas Jorgensen on Monday at Kings Lynn. He actually said that he felt that leaving the Championship was a mistake. From his point of view, he was trying to get things going in Poland. Didn't really work out for him. So he'll be looking to establish himself as a big heat leader. Big year for Leon Flint. They've made him captain. He'll be one of the youngest captains in the sport, but he's certainly got those kind of credentials. Probably the key, you mentioned Jonas Knudsen, who looked good in his appearances. He'll be on that assessed average, so if he can make good inroads into that, then that's what will take them up. They've missed out, haven't they, Berwick, in the last few years? Often not by too much. This year they just lost too many home matches. So top 6 out of 9. I think they'll certainly go in with a team that they think is going to be there or thereabouts to challenge there. They were very close this last year. It was just too many injuries at the wrong time, and they just had a run of 3 or 4 matches where they took a beating and things ran away with them slightly. We'll do it in alphabetical order. So there's Berwick. Let's go to Birmingham next. Now, a club that I know that you know probably more than any. And Nick Morris making the move across from the East Midlands to the West Midlands is quite a marquee signing and takes up quite a chunk of the average there with 10.13 to his name. Tell us about the team building there at the Brummies, because Justin Sedgman's back, James Pearson's back, and a few other faces from the past making a return as well, like James Wright. Yeah, waiting on one rider to complete the Birmingham team. You're absolutely right. 10 points does take up a great chunk of team building. It's a completely genuine average. Nick Morris is an absolute out-and-out number one in this league and does it home and away. So there's no qualms there. And they've gone a different way to Oxford, who we'll come to shortly, who've also got the 10-point man on their side. So Birmingham a more in-depth approach. Justin Sedgman had a good year last year, justifies his average and his return. And they are... Talked about other teams. Talked about Wolverhampton actually in the Premiership. I think Birmingham need one of those other riders we've talked about, Stefan Nielsen, Alfie Botel, etc., to make a step up. And if they do that, then they'll challenge for the playoffs. I think James Wright's a good move. He goes well at Perry Bar, always has done, and looked good there last season. So I think he's on a slightly false average on that sort of 5.5 point mark. And James Pearson, second season, so time for him to kick on. We don't know yet who they'll complete their side with, but certainly after all the turbulence of takeovers and what have you this time last winter, I think the good news for Birmingham is that they're building a team. Here we are in early to mid-December, and they know what they're going with for next year. So again, fingers crossed for them, they can challenge. One of the big question marks for the Championship was Edinburgh Monarchs for 2023. Thankfully, they are back at Armadale for one more season, and a lot of teams were maybe circling like vultures around the Edinburgh team to try and pick off one or two of their stars, but they're back. Sam Masters has obviously departed the Edinburgh Monarchs to the Oxford Cheetahs, and we'll talk about that in just a few moments, but Josh Pickering is back, and he's going to be leading the Monarchs in 2023. Yeah, indeed, and obviously vitally important for them to keep Josh Pickering, having lost Sam Masters, and there's no doubt that Josh Pickering will be a good number one for them
this coming season. Rumours obviously circulate as to who will join him at the top end of the team, and there are sort of various gaps, and you can look at who may or may not, and we'll have to wait and see what they confirm. But you know that Edinburgh will always do a good job in terms of team building, and they'll always be there or thereabouts. It's surprising it's actually 7 years since they won the championship back in 2015, so they regularly make the playoffs, haven't quite taken that final step. Kyle Bickley's an interesting one, coming in at reserve. He's had a tough time this year. Of course, he started the year at Berwick. Time for him to kick on now, and on a track where I know he's gone well in the past. He's guested for and against at Edinburgh, and indeed racing in the National League too. I think he's probably key to their season as things stand, whilst obviously we don't know their entire lineup.
Yeah, a few familiar faces for the Edinburgh Monarchs. They've announced Kai Thompson this week, but he'll be joining Josh Pickering and Jacob Hook from the 2022 Edinburgh Monarchs, and that single edition so far, new edition being Kyle Bickley at reserve. Still got 22.45 points to play with of the Edinburgh Monarchs. Next up then, their near neighbours just a little bit down the M8, the Glasgow Tigers, and for them, well, they've got their sights set on the very top, and on silverware, of course, because they came very, very close once again getting to the playoffs, but frustratingly so near but yet so far. And they've rung quite a few major changes to their lineup, with some big outs, including Craig Cook, and some big ins, including Chris Harris.
I think it's a good looking team so far, albeit awaiting confirmation, I think, on two riders. Again, the rumour mill is in full overdrive as to who they will be, but I think it's a great looking top three that doesn't take up a massive amount of points. When you look at Harris and Basso, and I know Chris Harris didn't have a brilliant season by his standards with Glasgow the last time he was there, but he certainly came off the back of a good one this year. Basso is only going in one direction forward, as is Tom Brennan. So Glasgow's prospects, I think, look good. They will always be up there. And Ace Piper is a fascinating newcomer to this league. And initially, I think his aim will be to match or beat his peers in that reserve department, take points off the other reserves. Certainly showed, as you mentioned, on the 21 final. He had that ride, didn't he, at Bellevue in the pairs, in the Premiership pairs, where he rode a brilliant first lap, and then unfortunately on a really heavy, difficult track, he lost it coming off the fourth bend. But just, you see those little flashes of talent, and you see, well, that's what a rider can do. And we've seen the way people can mature from a youngster around Glasgow. So that's an interesting pickup as well. So without being certain about who they're going to complete their side with, Glasgow looking good so far. And Novak, if he can get round the away tracks, then again that could make a mockery of his average.
And having the experience of somebody like Chris Harris in any team, and I think Berwick really benefited from this last year, and Leon Flint certainly benefited from it, and now similar, I guess, with Ace Piper, for example. Even Tom Brennan, being able to learn from the likes of Chris Harris, close up, it's got to be a boost off the track as well as on it.
Yeah, Chris will get involved, no doubt about that. I think there are several riders who do, to be fair. It's not just Chris, but generally as long as they see that the young rider, or whoever is taking the advice and listening, then they're prepared to give of their time. And I've seen it with Chris on numerous occasions. So there's no doubt that if you have a rider with that experience in the pits, in your number one berth or your heat leader berth, then you'd be mad not to take advantage of that experience. And I'm sure that he will do just that round Glasgow.
Next up, the Oxford Cheetahs, who are such a welcome addition back into British Speedway, and a great place to go and watch your Speedway. If you've not been, certainly add it to your list for next year, just for a night out if you're in the area. But they've gone fairly top-heavy, I think Dave would say. Sam Masters, 10.58, top scorer in the championship last season. A huge number one. There is definitely an out-and-out number one, but they've also got some other big hitters in there with Lewis Kerr and Scott Nichols. And then Cameron Heaps, Jordan Jenkins, Henry Atkins and Luke Colleen. They've certainly got some strength in that top five. I guess the question mark will be the reserve berths, but certainly going big this year, Oxford.
Well, I'm sure that's the case. Oxford obviously we know Oxford was a huge success this year in terms of the regeneration, the return, the crowds and whatever. What wasn't a success, unfortunately for them, was the league position, because they finished second from bottom, only 1 point off the bottom, which was, I think, with the team they had, was a big disappointment. So it's no surprise they've made big changes. Fascinating way of doing it, with bringing in, as you say, a 10.5 rider and two more big hitters in Scott Nichols and Louis Kerr. That is some top three that's going to win races home and away. I think be interesting to see how it goes lower down. I like Jordan Jenkins a great deal. I think he did a great job at Redcar. I like the progression element they've got too, with bringing in 3 from the Chargers, so you can see that development with the club. That's good. I think Cameron Heaps is an absolute key for them to have a better season than he had this year. No question there. And they're going to have to keep those top 3 fit and in form. If they have a member of the top 3 off form for an away match or wherever, or heaven forbid someone gets injured and they're using rider replacement, that's probably where they could hit trouble. But as things stand, certainly they won't be short on race wins, and Oxford, they're going big to try and have real success next year.
Plymouth Gladiators have made some big changes as well. Now, of course, they had problems at number 1 in 2022 with Eddie Kennett, who, despite what people say, he didn't actually just have one race. He had a few before getting injured. By the way, here's a quiz question for you. Who is the only rider to have been beaten by Eddie Kennett in 2022? There's one rider, and it's a British rider, one rider who was beaten by fair and square in the only race by Eddie Kennett where he scored a point.
Oh dear, oh dear. I mean, that first of all requires you to know who they were racing against on that night.
I think it would have been Poole.
Right, okay. So if he was racing number 1, then it would have been probably in Heat 1. Let me have a guess at Drew Kemp.
Yes. Boom. Look at that, hey.
I retire. I'm gonna say, the peak of my career now. I'm done.
Wow. I'm impressed you can remember who was riding at number 2 on that day.
Well, I couldn't. That was a guess as well, but yes.
It was in there. Indeed. So anyway, they have got a number 1 now, and that is Kyle Howarth, who makes the move from Leicester. Dan Gilks, Ben Barker, Richie Worrell and Ben Trigger also announced. They've got a couple of spots left to fill there, but certainly looks like a solid lineup if Ben Barker can perform as we know he can perform, particularly at home. Richie Worrell, always a good solid pair of hands as well.
Yep, good top end again. Richie Worrell flies around Coliseum, got a maximum there at the end of the season, guesting. Kyle Howarth is a very, very good campaigner at that level too, and we know how good Ben Barker is. Obviously, his season ended in not the circumstances he would have wanted. Dan Gilks, key. He'll be starting in the top 5. I'm sure with the way their team is built. We've talked about him in the Premiership. I'm sure he'll come back okay from injury. It's a big step for young Ben Trigger, who's a lad that I saw at Leicester a couple of years ago in the National League and made good progress. And again, similar to Ace Piper, it's a case of trying to beat his fellows in that position, and also with the fact that the Coliseum is obviously a technical track to ride, a different track. He's got experience there, so if he jumps out the gate, then who knows who he might be.
Well, the reigning champions, of course, and the team to beat in 2023 will be the Poole Pirates, who made it back-to-back League and Cup titles. So far, though, as far as the team announcements are concerned, it's been fairly light on the ground. Danny King has departed, probably the biggest news. Steve Worrell, though, is back, and he'll also be taking over as captain for the Poole Pirates in 2023 as well. But I don't think any particular massive surprises there. What about any other further announcements for the Poole Pirates? Do you see any further announcements on the horizon?
I don't think we can expect any surprises at the top end. The fact that they made that call on Danny King, which must have been a tough one because they got three riders on very similar averages, so you'd have to make the assumption that the other two are back, and also you'd have to make the assumption that the Australians that we talked about in the Premiership section see their long-term futures there. You always know that Poole, whatever league they're in, are going to build a team that's going to be competitive right at the top. Okay, this year they didn't quite finish top, but they still got the job done in the playoffs. They were the informed team and got it spot on. Danny Ford and Matt Ford know what they're doing there. So although the Poole fans have had to wait, and will still have to wait, I think, a bit longer, I don't think they've got too much to worry about in terms of having a strong side in the Championship.
They have definitely signed riders. I know that firsthand. So fear not. It's not like they're floundering round. There is a plan. Right, the Red Car Bears, or is it the Red Car Witches / Aces? Because we've got Eric Riss, James Shanes, Charles Wright, Daniel Hume, Danny King, Jason Edwards and Jake Mulford. Bit of familiarity here, of course. Charles Wright, interestingly, has been signed along with Jason Edwards onto a contract to include next year as well, and 2024 I'm talking about. So they because I think they felt that perhaps the vultures were circling. They wanted to have a bit of surety about their lineup and not to be having to battle to keep their own assets and have them sort of wooed away. So an interesting move there to try and make life a bit easier for themselves next year by signing riders on longer contracts.
Yeah, I know they were frustrated to lose both, particularly Louis Kerr and Jordan Jenkins to Oxford. I'm sure both went well this year, so they would have probably wanted to keep them. Having said that, breaking news, stand by, kiss of death moment coming on, but Redcar are my tip, as things stand, to be the strongest team in the championship. I really like the look of this team in that it has the strong top three. Mentioning Charles Wright on a lower average than you'd expect, I really like what they've brought in lower down. Daniel Hume, I think, was so unlucky not to get back in at Glasgow, but he took massive strides. Jason Edwards is a young lad going well. I think Jake Mulford with the team place at Bellevue is going to be doing a lot more speedway next year, and obviously gaining as he goes. James James was an interesting one. Obviously, James sometimes struggles with his gating, but I think at Redcar he'll enjoy that track, and they'll provide with some spectacular action. The top end looks good. I can't fault that Redcar team. I think at the moment, as I say, a long way to go. Nothing's happened on track yet, but to me that's the team at the moment.
Okay, watch this space, folks, and always a well-prepared track there, and Johnny Swales and the team at Redcar, they always put a great racing surface on, and always some great racing there for the neutral, let alone the sides involved. So well done to Redcar on a strong looking side there. Scunthorpe Scorpions have put together a familiar looking side, both from last year and from riders of past, such as Michael Palm-Toft making a return to the Scorpions. Simon Lambert comes back from last year, as does Zane Kennedy. Joe Thompson and Connor Mountain are new riders heading for the Eddie Wright Raceway, with still 2 places to fill at positions 1 and 5, you fancy, certainly at the moment. They've got 24 points still to play with. You think maybe a Ryan Douglas size hole at least to fill there. Watch this space on that one, but Scunny looking fairly solid throughout so far.
Good looking side, Scunthorpe. To me, as far as we know so far, and you can make your own guesses as to who takes those final 2 places. We'll have to wait and see. To me, it looks the best Scunthorpe side I've seen for a while. Michael Palm-Toft coming in there is a really solid addition to their middle order. I think he'll do a great job for them. Connor Mountain likewise goes well on that track. Zane Kennedy was flying until he was flying, literally, towards the end of the season, and thank goodness he escaped largely unscathed from that accident. And yeah, Joe Thompson coming in at reserve. I find it disappointing that Dan, as things stand, who's got a 5.2 average, hasn't got a place in the championship. I find that very disappointing indeed. But Joe is underrated himself, and will do him good to get away from Leicester as a home track in the championship and learn a different circuit. No reason at all why he can't have the beating of several number 7s. I know Rob Godfrey's excited by the Scunthorpe team for next year, and whether it's a league-winning team, time will tell, but I certainly think it's a playoff team.
It looks like everybody's capable of the playoffs, doesn't it? You know, there's no team there that you really fear for. They've all got their strong riders at some point. Of course, it's that unknown of the acid test of actually putting the team out on the track and seeing how it goes. And of course, injuries, as we know, can play a huge part. Hopefully, we don't have too many of them. But Speedway is that of that nature where these things play a huge part, and it's how teams then react to that and what the plan B is, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and we should certainly go into a season with all the teams having a realistic chance of making the playoffs. And this is why we have the points limits and the equalisation, and obviously within that you can take your own direction as to how you want to build your side, and plenty of things come into play on that one. But this is the beauty of the sport, that when we get to March, April, every team should have their aspirations of making it. No one knows who's going to get affected too badly by injuries, loss of form, all those variables. But that all gets worked out on the track, and I think it's a really interesting year ahead. And again, whilst I've said who I think at the moment is looking good, that could all change very, very quickly indeed.
Yeah, it's the exciting part of the season where everybody's got a chance, and let's see how things pan out. A couple of other things before we wrap up this section. word about the National League. Obviously, they had their AGM a little later, so team building still very much a work in progress much of the National League. But great to see Workington officially back, and they've already announced a couple of riders. Luke Harrison gets a spot, as does Luke Crang, with Workington looking to build Speedway's number one team of Lukes so far. And the other thing to look out for, of course, is that news, sort of concerning news really, with Mildenhall, who made it to the grand final this year, but now their future in doubt for 2023.
Yeah, fingers crossed on both those two clubs. They have until the 17th of January to confirm, and indeed anybody else who wanted to get involved has until the 17th of January to confirm. So let's keep our fingers crossed. I know Mildenhall suffered this year, and it didn't help them also towards the end with the long gap before the final, and they've made it pretty clear that they do need some additional funding. I know there's work taking place to try and achieve that. Let's hope they do, because we don't want to lose venues, and particularly a standalone venue at Mildenhall, so hopefully that will be okay. And Armadale, there was a piece in Speedway Star last week where John Campbell was explaining the situation there, and they're hoping that some of the eligibility criteria open up a bit to allow certain riders into the league, which would help them particularly, especially with the competition they're facing from Workington, which is brilliant to see Workington in and the work being done at Northside. But obviously up there you've got Berwick as well, and it would be good to see Armadale continue. So there's still the hope that there will be the 8 clubs at the tapes. Obviously, Plymouth have chosen to step away from that, but hopefully we will get 8 clubs. And I think we're heading into a year where the talent pool in terms of up and coming 15, 16-year-olds is stronger than it's been for a while. We have some. You mentioned Luke Harrison going in at Workington. There's certainly 3 or 4 more that are on that list to be announced with teams. So my advice always, if you're fairly near a National League track, it is well worth going, because if you're a Speedway fan, you will see a rider or riders who you'll want to keep an eye on. So yeah, let's hope we get those 8 clubs to the tapes and have a good NDL season.
Coming up in the next part, we're going to have a chat with Ben Duffill, who is one of the men behind BSN, the British Speedway Network, which brought live streaming and shone an extra light on Championship Speedway, really. And I think a lot more people witnessed Championship Speedway, maybe some of which for the very first time, some of which elsewhere in the world, which was great extra exposure and something new to British Speedway, bringing the whole live streaming thing in. And BSN will be back next season to also complement the Eurosport coverage, because Eurosport will be doing exactly the same as they did this last year, covering the 18 or so fixtures and the British final and the culmination of the Premiership season as well, of course, with the playoffs and the grand final come the crunch part of the Premiership season. But great to have an additional offering, and British Speedway fans have never had it so good, with never so much Speedway available to be watched on the TVs, should they choose to do that. It's
something that worked, quite simply, and it was a big commitment at the time and a step into the unknown. So I take my hat off to Ben and Martin and everyone involved. I know how much hard work went into it, and some of the long hours, some of the travel, and some of the, I think I keep crazy schedules at some point, but some of the schedules of track to track on day to day was quite incredible. But I think it's ever more important, and we know the cost of living, we know the bills and whatever, and how much it's cost to travel. And the reality is that people sometimes need different ways of being able to follow their team. It did work in the Championship. I know the viewing figures were very, very good. I'm sure that will be the case again next year. The offering itself, if you compare the offering from the first couple of events to the end of the season, that evolved as well, really impressively. So there's no doubt that it found its place in the sport, and pleased to see it being backed for next year and clearly going to do more. So yeah, exciting times to complement what's done on Eurosport in the Premiership as well. So you're absolutely right. There's certainly, in terms of domestic speedway, you have the option, if you cannot make it to the track, you can still watch the meetings live, and there'll be more and more to see.
Good stuff. Well, cheers, Dave. It'll not be long before March, and then it'll all start again. And how many meetings was it you went to last year? Did you crack 100?
Oh dear! I think it was I think it was 87 live, and then about another 12 or 13 in a TV studio. So yeah, it was a lot anyway.
Yeah, it's a fair amount of speedway. That, well, maybe even more next year. Who knows? It's going to be a big season, and it'll be not far away. Cheers, Dave.
Cheers, Ian. Good to speak to you, and to everyone have a Merry Christmas.
Dave Rowe there, looking at the chances of all the teams in the Premiership and the Championship, and an update on what 2023 might have in store. Well, one thing we did touch on there was BSN, the British Speedway Network, will be back in 2023, expanding their coverage, not only covering 35 meetings at the Championship level, but also now moving into the Premiership to supplement Eurosport's coverage with further meetings from the Premiership clubs. And we'll hear more about that and the BSN journey from one of BSN's creators, one of the bosses. Ben Duffill will be with us in the next part of No Brakes, No Fear.
No Brakes, No Fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
Welcome back. I'm Ian Brannan, and in this final part of the podcast, I want to turn the spotlight on one of the success stories of British Speedway of modern times, and certainly something that has taken my life in a different direction, and it's been fantastic for me to be a part of, but I know so many people have enjoyed watching the coverage of BSN, the British Speedway Network, which has brought championship-level speedway into the homes and onto the mobile devices or wherever for speedway fans, not only in the UK, but also around the world. And BSN will be back even bigger in 2023, and we'll hear more about that in just a moment. But one of the men behind the project is Ben Duffill, along with Martin Hunter. And this time last year, Ben was an outgoing promoter at Redcar Speedway, where he'd been involved for quite a long time. And a year ago, Ben, this was all just an idea. It was something that I know you talked about as a possibility, and you had this knowledge that perhaps streaming could work. You knew the obstacles that needed to be overcome from the BSPL side, and here you are a year further on, and you must be pretty happy with how it's all turned out.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a surreal journey, really. We have got to pinch ourselves every now and then to see how far we've come in such a short space of time. But yeah, at this point last year, it was an idea. We didn't actually pitch the idea to the BSPL until January. It's just happened so quickly. I think there were probably points this time last year where I didn't really believe it could happen. But yeah, big thanks to all of the clubs that put their faith in us and allowed it to, really.
So that was 2022. 2023, BSN is back and even bigger, and 35 championship matches, that's already been announced, which is the same as this last year. That'll also include championship riders individual, the championship pairs, the British Under-21 championships as well. Plus, of course, BSN was involved this year with the Premiership pairs. The big news this week is that BSN will be covering Premiership matches in 2023. Tell us more about that, because obviously it goes alongside the existing Eurosport coverage as well. So it's further enhancing the coverage of British Speedway, and Premiership Speedway is coming to BSN.
Yeah, great news. Really excited to be working with the top tier as well. Obviously, we covered the Premiership pairs, which we really enjoyed, and the Premiership came to us fairly early on to ask us if we would work with them on that, which we were really keen to do. The idea was to stream 2 or 3 meetings from every track, plus the Premiership pairs and the Knockout Cup final as well, which we've agreed to do. So yeah, we're going to have a bumper schedule next year. We've got 35 championship meetings again, and we'll be working with the Premiership to cover 19 of their fixtures. So it's going to be a busy year for us, but it's something we're really excited about. When we first started the British Speedway Network, the name British Speedway Network, there was no coincidence that we chose that. We felt this was a product not just for the championship, but it could involve the whole of British Speedway. The NDL is a league we'd like to work with as well. We really need to look at what's possible, really, for us to achieve next year, because we've taken on a lot now with the Premiership and the Championship. So, just trying to figure out team-wise whether we can actually commit to any more than that. What we don't want to do is commit to too much and see a drop in quality. That's not what anybody wants. But, Rome wasn't built in a day. This was always a project that was going to take a little time to grow. But we are, bit by bit. And we've got lots of other exciting plans for BSN going forwards as well.
People will say, just to sort of play devil's advocate, some people will say, well, it's great having so much available on TV, but does this take away from the gate? Does this take away from people coming into the stadiums? Now, my personal view on this is firsthand, having been at the matches with BSN, I don't think it does. There have been great crowds where we've been, places like Poole, been to Leicester, Redcar, all these places have had good crowds. And I think the ones that perhaps where people will say, well, the crowd was maybe a bit less, are usually fixtures that have been rearranged, ones that weren't originally in the calendar. It's a restaging of a rain-off that's been put on a day that maybe isn't already ideal, whether BSN are there or not. So what would your view on that be when people mention that kind of thing?
So we started streaming at Redcar when I was a promoter there. And that's kind of where this all began. And we certainly didn't see any difference in our gates. I think the answer to that would be if clubs really felt it was affecting the gates that much, they wouldn't be streaming themselves. What we've found with our data is that usually we're pulling in people who wouldn't go to that track anyway. For example, if we're streaming in Glasgow, we open up to a whole new audience now that are not necessarily just watching from that area or the away fans. It's across the entire country. In fact, further than that, our audience spans the entire world. So we're opening up these meetings to people to watch that wouldn't necessarily have watched anyway. So there will be one or two who maybe choose a stream over live Speedway. I would say they are the vast minority. There is no replacement for live sport. There just isn't. It doesn't matter how good a broadcast or a stream is. It doesn't compare to actually being there, getting the smells, the sounds, the whole atmosphere, everything. So our aim is always to supplement and bring in people who wouldn't necessarily go to these meetings, and to support British Speedway clubs. We won't go into figures, but we are delivering a significant financial amount to each club that works with us. So I know from some of the meetings that we've had with them, it's been a really big help in 2022. And if we can help these clubs to grow and survive what is a very difficult time for everybody at the moment, if we can supplement that income that they get from the gates as well, then that has to be a positive thing for everybody.
I think that's an important point to make as well, because when you are buying a stream, the clubs are taking a proportion of that fee back in. And so, as you say, for somebody who's miles away and is never going to be at that meeting whatsoever, and probably otherwise is going to be looking online just to check the result or whatever, I suppose that the club there is gaining a few quid that otherwise wouldn't be going anywhere. It would just be staying in that person's pocket, wouldn't it?
Exactly. We've seen so many clubs close in recent years as well, and there's a huge fan base there around the country now that don't have a local track to support. Travel can be 100-200 miles or more to reach your local track now, which that's not really feasible for a lot of people to do every week. So we're opening up a door to lots of people who otherwise could be lost to the sport, and that's the feedback we're getting. We do speak to and have a lot of feedback from our viewers, and that there's a lot of positivity coming in that way. A lot of people, I think, could have been lost to the sport now that that there is an avenue for them to watch and to support British Speedway at the same time. So. But yeah, our figures and our data shows that the vast majority that are watching these streams are not from the local area. They're from everywhere else in the country.
the quality of the product obviously is of paramount importance, and as a result of that, there has been significant investment through the course of the season, hasn't there? Tell us about that, Ben, because I know firsthand the equipment we were using at the start of the season, completely different to the gear we were using at the end of the season. Everything got upgraded as we went. And the stuff we were using to begin with was expensive stuff, let's make no bones about it. But there's a big difference between high-end gear and then broadcast professional kit, which is really what we're using at the end of the season. Fibre optic cables, professional upload and uplink devices, that the same as what Eurosport use. And that comes at a premium, but that is for the betterment of the overall product. But, quite a big investment, but really shows your intent.
When we started out on this journey, there was a lot of investment put in from our own savings, but both Martin Hunter's and my own, which in theory should have done the job. But yeah, it didn't always do what we hoped it would do or what it should have done. So it's been a big learning journey for us as well. Broadcasting equipment is not cheap. It's quite a niche market. Anything that's quite niche is always going to come at a premium because they're selling less of this gear to people than they would the mass market, for example. So it has been something we've had to build over time as finances have allowed. I think that the big turning point for us was the stream that we did at Edinburgh at the end of May, when we lost basically any ability to connect to the internet. And I think at that point we knew that if we didn't put in this money, that there wasn't going to be a business to come out with. Customers expect a certain level of service, and they should. And that's exactly what we aim to deliver and always have. So we invested a significant sum of money after that meeting and have continued to do so as well. We've got a lot of upgrades planned for 2023. Again, we're talking tens of thousands that we're going to have to put into this to make it work. But the support that we've had from our subscribers and obviously the members of the BSPL as well, that's going straight back into what we're doing. It's going back into the clubs, into British Speedway, and into our setup, so we can improve and continue to deliver a service that meets both our and the subscribers' expectations. So yeah, we've still a long way to go. We have very high expectations of ourselves. I would say Martin and I are both perfectionists in what we do. And in order for us to reach the standards that we want to reach, a lot of investment has to be made. But that's standard with any new business. I've owned and sold a business before. It's not cheap, and it takes time. But where the intention's there, the commitment, which 100% is, then we'll keep improving.
BSN's coverage in 2023 for the Championship then is going to be similar but different, if I can say that, because still going to be 35 meetings, but in 2022 all of the playoffs were covered, whereas the way that the playoffs are going to work this year is going to mean a change of format where you might have some clashes, so things are going to be spread out slightly differently. But one of the key things which is going to be new about the Championship is the BSN series, which is largely going to get underway at the start of the season. And what an honour to have a tournament named after BSN after the first year. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, a huge honour really to be given the naming rights to the Championship's new competition. I know that the Championship are really keen to give this competition some real standing. That there've been a few tournaments such as this have come and gone over the years, and that's something that we want to change. So we want something that can become a mainstay for the Championship. We're looking at completely rebranding that and giving it, a bit of a modern look, and the coverage will be there on BSN for people to watch as well. So that's something we're really excited about. You touched upon the the new structure for our schedule. Last year we covered every playoff match. Because of the change in format this year, we looked at that, and the offer was there to do all of the playoffs as well. But looking at the bigger picture, we don't want to be a reason that the playoffs have to be delayed any longer than they should be. The playoffs went on for longer than anybody would have liked this year. The weather played a massive part in that. If we were in a situation, which is very likely to happen, where, for example, 4 Friday clubs, there are 4 clubs resting on a Friday, all qualify for the playoffs and are in those group stages, then the clashes will happen. And in order for us to cover all of those fixtures, we just don't have the capacity to cover two matches at once. People want to watch live as well, so people don't really want to have to watch one and watch the other on demand. So we felt it would be better to cover one from each of those groups. What that'll allow us to do is to pick probably the most appealing fixtures as well, and also to make sure that we don't cause any delays on the championship side and then move to the finals. So most of those clubs, I think, will be actually covering those other meetings as well, so that they won't be lost. If people want to tune in and watch those, they can, and they can actually donate that revenue directly to the clubs. So the option's still there for people to watch, but this was definitely the best way for us to do it.
And looking at the Premiership offering, the Premiership coverage is surely going to open up a new audience to BSN because of the interest in Premiership Speedway, the interest in these level of riders. Many riders are going to be involved in Extraliga. We've got a number of GP riders, household names, Jack Holder, Dan Bewley, of course, big star in Poland as he is here. We've also got Tobias Mujalak, Krzysztof Kasprzak, and Jason Doyle, other names yet to be announced potentially as well, which could generate certainly big interest in Poland, big interest around the speedway world, and to be able to see these riders on BSN wherever they are, and surely that's going to open up a whole new audience.
Yeah, looking at the Premiership for next year, it's looking as strong as ever, really, to me. We've got 4 GP stars already named to race in the UK. There are rumours of some very big names coming back to British Speedway as well. Whether that materialises or not, I'm not sure. Luke Becker's a reserve in the GPs as well. So, the standards looking good. It looks to be an exciting league, and for us to be able to showcase that as well is hugely exciting for us, and I'm sure it's something that fans are going to be grateful for, because if I can only speak for myself, but the more speedway the better. I love watching my speedway, and there's going to be some really huge clashes next year. Like I say, some big names in the Premiership, and to open up that to people all around the world has got to be a positive thing. So, yeah, I think it's going to be really well received.
Yeah, it is shaping up to be an outstanding year, and as you say, there are some names I think yet to be revealed potentially. But if it all comes off, I think it's going to be. I mean, people look at the Polish league, but I think you've got to say that the British league will be a very close second, because I think that the excitement levels in both of the top 2 leagues are going to be more than probably Sweden will deliver, surely, and Denmark. I can't see another league that's going to have bigger names, bigger clashes than, apart from Poland, than the British league next year. It just isn't.
British Speedway still has a lot to offer. The way teams are shaping up next year, there's definitely going to be more of a disparity between the standards in the Championship and the Premiership. I think, the relaxing of the Polish rules, where last year a lot of these top riders were restricted as to how many leads they can do. They can do one more now, and obviously Britain is high up there on the wish list of some of these riders to be able to compete. And so the fact that we're seeing some of these names come back, we saw Tobias Mujalak as well come back into British Speedway. We got Fredrik Jakobsen at Kings Lynn, who's a huge talent. It's really, really positive. I'm really liking what I'm seeing in the Premiership for next year. I think it looks very positive. It's hugely exciting for me, and hopefully that can continue because it's good for these riders too. You know, the UK has always been, if you like, a bit of a training ground for some of these riders. Our tracks are quite unique. You know, racing in Poland every week on these big fast tracks, yeah, a lot of these riders can do that week in, week out, but to really hone the skills and become better, you know, the UK is the obvious place to come and do it just because of that, just the diversity of the tracks that we have over here. I'm pretty sure that's why we see the likes of Jason Doyle racing here. You know, he knows that being able to race his bike as regularly as he can in the UK, which is something the UK can give, which other countries can't, is a huge positive. And, you know, hopefully we'll see a lot of riders coming back for that reason.
No doubt the question that many will have right now is, Ben, how much is all this going to cost? Because the championship coverage, those season passes are already on sale now. The early bird passes are always the cheapest way of watching BSN for the upcoming season. That was the case in 2022. Lots of people got involved early doors, paid up front, and it worked out a lot cheaper. You will be able to buy the individual fixtures if you want to pick and choose, of course, but if you want to come along for the ride, the best way to do it is get in there as early as possible. What's the damage going to be, Ben? What's the price for the Premiership coverage, and how's it going to work out?
We do want to offer value for money. We believe that we do. The Championship package is going out 19 meetings for £79. That's the early bird offer, available in December. The prices will rise ever so slightly in January and then come into the start of the season. So it works out at just over £4 a stream. That's for obviously a very high level of speedway in this country. So we hope people will view it the same way. You know, I've heard over the seasons several different viewpoints on where the pricing should be. You know, some people comparing, for example, to Netflix and Prime, and that you can pay as little as £10 or £11, for example, for a huge service like that. But the big difference is our audience. You know, when you're selling to millions, it's very different to selling to hundreds or, you know, a few thousands. So we've set a price point that makes it possible for us. As you've said, there are huge production costs for us. You know, every single broadcast that we send out has a significant price tag attached to it. So we take that into account, and also looking at people who want to buy the two packages, and basically we're keeping it at a price point that would cost you typically a season ticket for your local club. But instead of getting your 12, 14 fixtures, you're getting 54. So I think that offers huge value for money. And hopefully people will view it the same way.
And that was the question, I suppose, that people will be saying, well, if I've already bought the Championship stuff, will I be able to sort of add the Premiership on? Is there a package deal for the whole lot? And you're sort of suggesting there is.
Yeah, anybody basically who wants to buy the Premiership and Championship packages together, there will be a different price on those from January. It equates to what the early bird price is now. Right now, if people buy the early bird price for the Championship and the Premiership, that's as low price as they'll get it. You know, the idea of that is to get us through the winter and to help us to invest for next year. You know, obviously this is a point in the season now where we don't have any income other than that. So that allows us to prepare for the new season. So those people who commit to us early, they can take advantage of those lower prices. But, you know, this is a huge commitment for both Martin and myself as well. You know, one stream, for example, it's not just a day. It's typically, I would say, anything from 20 to 24 hours for us for a stream, plus all of the promotion and the video editing and everything that goes into it afterwards, the customer service. I would say if we do 2 streams in a week, that's typically, I would say, 50, 60 hours for both of us. So, you know, we're fully committed to this, and it has to allow us to get through this period and get over the winter, get into next year, and be in a position where we want to be, which is to produce, a broadcast that is on a par. We hope, or certainly as close to that they would expect with anything they would get from a major broadcaster, for example.
It's going to be a big year, and definitely you want to get on those deals now because, as they say, they're not going to get any cheaper than they are now. And for the championship and the Premiership coverage, you can have one or the other, or you can get both. Whatever the best deals will be between now and the end of this year, the end of December. Find out the info. watch.britishspeedway.co.uk is the place to go, and you'll find all the info there. watch.britishspeedway.co.uk. Okay, but grab those deals while they're there. But there will be deals in the new year. But this is the best one right now. There you go. There's your inside tip. Right, the hard sell out of the way. Let's talk about transponders coming into Speedway. We talked about them earlier, and BSN, one of the people, one of the organisations that's going to have access to the data and include that in the broadcast too.
It's a really positive move for British Speedway. I'm really pleased that they decided to do that. Transponders are a big investment for British Speedway. It'll come, with a significant price tag for every club, but it's certainly, it's a move, isn't it? Basically into the 21st century. Some sports have had, such as motocross, and you even go down your local go-karting track. They've all got transponders, and this is a way of getting data which can bring something new to the sport. I think the use of that data will certainly develop over time. How much of that we can use initially, it probably won't be as much as we can use, for example, in 2024. But it's really pleasing to us that British Speedway is moving that way, and also that the data is available to us as well. It's something that we can incorporate into our live streams, and something that we're working to do already. So. Yeah, I think it's an excellent move, and they deserve a lot of credit for doing that.
Yeah, I don't think people quite realise how big a change this is going to be for Speedway, but I guess people will find out next year for sure. Finally, Ben, before we finish, obviously this has been a terrific season for BSN and for yourself and for Martin in particular, putting all this together and getting to where it is now. When you look back on the 2022 season, what would be your standout highlights when you think back of this year? Those moments to frame in particular. You've been around all the tracks. Both of you have attended all the meetings. I think yourself and Martin are the only ever presence really throughout the course of the journeys right across the land from Glasgow to Plymouth and all places in between. What would be your standout moments?
It's a tough question. There have been many. One for me will certainly be working with you guys, and the whole team have just been absolutely amazing to work with. There's been some friendships developed from that will last a long time, and that's been one of the most enjoyable parts of it for me, really. It's seen us all develop together. And the other is just, the really kind and positive feedback we've had from subscribers. We've had some lovely messages and some really, detailed accounts of what difference this has made to people, particularly those who had been lost to Speedway. Some who can't physically get there anymore just because their health doesn't allow them to, and when we hear this firsthand from people and what a difference it's made to them, it's quite touching to hear that the service that we've created has had such an impact on so many different people. That for me is better than anything really. Is better than any particular stream we've done. When you hear the difference this can make to people and how much people have just enjoyed it, that brings a smile to our face and makes it all worthwhile. We love Speedway, we live for the sport, and to be involved in a different way like this and to experience such a different side to it has been it's been wonderful to experience. I've loved every minute of it. You know, there's certainly been some tough times along the way, but on a whole, it's been a lot of fun, and it's great to be involved in the sport. I have been since I was 15 now in a various number of roles. But I can't say I've enjoyed any as much as I'm enjoying the BSN journey. It's been brilliant, and I hope it continues for a long time.
Undoubtedly one of the success stories of British Speedway of this year, and if not of recent times. And really, when you consider everything else that's on offer, beyond BSN, of course, the Eurosport coverage, Discovery with the Grand Prix coverage. There's still going to be Swedish Speedway and Polish Speedway available on TV elsewhere as well. In addition to the individual club streams from various clubs in the championship as well. You know, you've never had so much Speedway to welcome into your homes. And find out more about BSN's offering at watch.britishspeedway.co.uk. Thanks very much, Ben, for joining us, and all the best for the festive period, and we'll hear from you in 2023, no doubt.
All the best to you, Ian, and also to all of the listeners out there as well. Have a great one.
My thanks once again to Ben Duffill from the British Speedway Network, and so you can find out more about BSN on their own website. And well, thanks to you as well for listening to the podcast. Hopefully you found it useful. An update on where we're at so far. There will be more announcements as the days and weeks continue, of course, and before you know it, it'll be March. There'll be pre-season testimonials, and then the league season's going to get underway, end of March, start of April time. Before you know it, we'll be there, back in action once again, and we'll look forward to bringing you all that coverage as and when we get there. Of course, keep up to date with everything happening across British Speedway on the main websites, britishspeedway.co.uk, on the social media channels. Keep an eye out there for any announcements as and when they happen. Team announcements are going to continue to roll in. As of course, there's not too many left now, but a few key ones still to come down the pipe, as we know. But they'll be with you very, very soon indeed. Thanks very much for your company in this podcast and through the course of 2022 as well. For listening, if you've caught any of the previous episodes. Of course, if you haven't, you can catch up on them at any time. They're still there with some great guests to listen back to as well. And just a promotion for another podcast I did earlier this year with Kelvin Tatum. We did the first and currently so far the only episode of the podcast, Tatum Talks. But we had a good chat with Dan Bewley, who, of course, we now know is heading back to Bellevue. So have a listen to that if you want to check out some other Speedway content. Just search for Tatum Talks. And what's my other hobby horse? Oh, yes, Humans of Speedway, my other podcast. We will hopefully be updating that very, very soon as well as we head into the new year as well. So look out for those podcasts. Have a great festive break. And we'll be back with you with a new episode as soon as there's anything to say here on No Breaks, No Fear. Thanks very much. Have a great Christmas and New Year. And here's to 2023.
No Breaks, No Fear. The official British Speedway podcast.
Sports Social Podcast Network.